As usual, anti-Russia rhetoric was certainly not in short supply as NATO defence ministers held their latest meeting in Brussels. The UK's new Defence Secretary, Gavin Williamson, announced he is deploying 4 RAF Typhoon jets to Romania in response to what he called a more assertive Russia. Also, NATO is to establish 2 additional commander bases, raising the current number from 7 to 9.
NATO's primary purpose is to protect our almost 1 billion citizens from today's global threats. And as we prepare for the next year's summit in Brussels, we will continue to adapt our alliance to do just that.
NATO continues to build up its forces close to Russia's borders in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland and on the Black Sea. According to campaigners, NATO's increased military spending only benefits the arms industry at a time when millions of citizens in the alliance's member states are living in poverty.
The public doesn't want more expenditure for arms. This has actually been shown by research, by Pew Research, that most European citizens don't want more expenditure on defence.
NATO says its allies are doing great work to help stabilise Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria, without, of course, mentioning it was Western powers that bombed those countries into chaos. North Korea was also heavily criticised. Pyongyang says its actions are in response to US threats. NATO defence ministers have also agreed to substantially strengthen their cyber defences and capabilities. However, the focus of their military activities in Europe always switches back to Russia. In response, Moscow has positioned nuclear-capable missile units along its borders. The Kremlin has consistently made it clear it is not interested in attack, only defence. But analysts say that will not stop this 29-country military alliance from using Russia as an excuse to justify further expansion. Jerome Hughes, Press TV at NATO headquarters, Brussels.
A new Iranian military base has just been confirmed in Syria, roughly 40 miles from Israel's northern border. Satellite images acquired by the BBC from Western intelligence agencies have revealed at least 3 confirmed structures, with more well on the way. All concrete proof of Iran's commitment to establish permanent strongholds throughout the region. This isn't the first Iranian military site discovered in Syria, of course, and most agree that it certainly won't be the last. Israel has detected and possibly even targeted several Iranian strongholds in Syria over the last year, including what's believed to have been a chemical weapons plant and rocket storage facility for both Iran and Hezbollah. As if tensions on the border weren't bad enough, IDF missiles also just shot down an unmanned Syrian drone that attempted to breach Israeli airspace. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman reasserted Israel's position that it would always fire back when fired upon, promising that, quote, "The Syrian regime is responsible for every attack and violation of our sovereignty, and we will not allow the Shiite axis to be established in Syria as a base for action," end quote. While tensions between Israel and Syria are nothing new, the surprising situation between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia is threatening to explode into an all-out war. About a week after Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri resigned, accusing Hezbollah and Iran of seizing control of his parliament, the Saudi government is suddenly ordering all Saudi citizens to get out of Lebanon immediately. These are the kinds of words you typically hear before war is declared, a proclamation that, according to Hezbollah, the Saudis have already made. But Iran is actually seen as the major player behind the scenes of this conflict as well. Saudi Arabia and Iran are fierce enemies, and Iran's relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon has been skyrocketing in recent years. If a war were to break out, it would almost certainly be Iran's proxy war against the Saudi Empire. But one major factor in all of this still remains unclear: the true nature of Hariri's resignation from the Lebanese government. The Prime Minister made his announcement while abroad in Saudi Arabia, which at first was seen as a move of desperation to survive possible assassination at the hands of Hezbollah. But now the Lebanese government is claiming Hariri is actually being held captive in Saudi Arabia, and that his resignation was made under duress. This is a mystery that will definitely need to be cleared up soon, especially if the world hopes to escape another horrific Middle East war.
This is a matter of great concern to us. And what we want is for peace to be preserved in Lebanon. It is essential that no new conflict erupts in the region. It could have devastating consequences.
The Syrian government has condemned U.S. airstrikes on the country, which it says have resulted in the death of scores of civilians. In a statement addressing the UN Security Council, the Syrian Foreign Ministry condemned what it called crimes of the U.S.-led coalition in Raqqa and Deir el-Zor provinces. It also called on the Security Council to take urgent measures to stop the coalition, which Syria regards as illegal, from committing more crimes. Now, the latest condemnation comes on the heels of an attack on Saturday, which killed 10 civilians in Deir el-Zor. Syrian media, citing witnesses, says U.S.-led warplanes attacked residential areas near the Iraq border, causing massive destruction. Damascus has time and again complained of U.S.-led air raids, causing large numbers of civilian casualties. Turning to London, joined by Ammar Waka, founder and director of Nosas. Thank you so much for being with us. Well, tell me now, the Syrian government is condemning these latest American airstrikes. Tell me your take on this. Why do we see the U.S. Behaving in the way it is and inflicting, at this stage, such terror in these regions and with these attacks the way that they're doing?
Well, the point is, the point that the Syrian government is trying to make at the moment is that the American intervention and their allies, this allied intervention supposedly aimed at defeating Daesh or ISIS, is actually delaying the defeat of Daesh and causing more trouble and causing more civilian deaths. It is no secret, it has never been a secret actually, that the United States and their allies do not want to defeat ISIS, actually do not want the Syrian army to defeat ISIS and its allies. They would want to defeat ISIS themselves and the allied forces they have. They want to reap the rewards afterwards. And they let Daesh go, westwards and southwards as much as they like without any check. Even though their airplanes were in the skies for 3 years, so that they can go and confront the Syrian army. Now, what happened recently in Al-Bukamal was that the Syrian army took the city, apparently. The Syrian army spokesman declared that it was a liberated place. Now, apparently, the air forces prevented the Syrian army from taking complete control over the city, which allowed apparently Daesh to come and retake the city from the Syrian army. So they are still sort of intervening in a passive way until this moment, so that the Syrian army doesn't take control of its own cities. Now, we need to understand and remember as well that previously they intervened in a direct and an active way to prevent the Syrian army or to allow defeat of the Syrian army. I think the most a shiny example, so to speak, was in Deir el-Zor, where they bombed a Syrian army artillery unit, protecting the airport and protecting the city for more than an hour in a continued assault, which allowed ISIS or Daesh to come and take the hill and basically split the Syrian forces into two between the airport and the city in Deir el-Zor. So the Syrian government is sort of fed up with this, and they would want the international community to do something about it.
And what about that? What about that international community? You made an interesting point that the international community, Damascus, want them to do something because, of course, you have an entity involved in the country who was never invited by the government and actually is causing such chaos. What does it take? How likely, even after all these years, would we see something from the UN actually going against what the Americans are doing in Syria, at least at this point in time?
I think we all know that is highly unlikely to happen. The United States and their allies would tell you, or would want to tell you, that they are fighting international terrorism, no less, and that they are protecting themselves. They were never invited into Syria, and there is more than enough evidence that their intervention actually delayed the defeat of Daesh rather than hasten the defeat of Daesh. And there are so many speculations, but the fact of the matter is, and it remains, it has remained as such for a long time now, that they are not invited. Their presence is not legitimate, and they're trying to protect that presence and that interest with side agreements, with the Russians. They, for example, yesterday, They thought they had an agreement of some sort with the Russians. The Russians made a presidential statement saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and apparently the Americans said, yeah, but 1, 2, 3, 4 in a different way. They twisted the understandings, which prompted the Russians today to say, well, you cannot understand the agreements the way you like. The agreements need to be understood the way we draft them, and drafting was mutual. So the United States is trying to say, well, we're going to stay there. They're hoping that they're going to stay in northeastern Syria at least, in order to create certain circumstances where it would be hard for the Syrian government to retake that area into Syria. Now that would prompt several outcomes. It could prompt separation from that part of Syria, eastern of the Euphrates, northeastern Syria, from Damascus. It could also prompt chaos. We don't know what happens, but at the end of the day, the United States would not want to get out empty-handed, and the international community, so to speak, is not going to do anything about it.
Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. I'd love to talk to you again. Thanks so much for being with us, Mr. Ammar Waqaf, founder and director of Gnosis out of London.
Some people who identify themselves as non-binary don't use he or she, but instead use they. Carly Mitchell created this book using pictures to illustrate the non-binary main character. You can't tell whether it is a girl or a boy, which is how Carly has felt since the moment they could talk. Carly was born a girl, or what a non-binary calls female assigned. As a kid, Carly preferred sports, but on the rare occasion played with dolls. At some point, Carly realized that they did not identify with either gender.
But when it comes to gender, I just never been one or the other. And that's messy and it's confusing for people. And it can even cause people to be, resentful and violent towards me. But I don't know what to tell you. I am who I am.
As a teenager, Carly took female hormones for medical reasons, then considered taking testosterone to enhance masculinity, all in an effort to fit in. But all it did was increase Carly's depression.
Sucks if you're it's not easy to be in a society where you're born one way, you don't identify with the body you're in, and you also have people saying like, well, live with it, so I think being a human being is uncomfortable.
Today, at 36, Carly is an athletic, sports-loving person who at the same time is sensitive and artistic. But non-binary people can sometimes create confusion for others.
It was hot. It was like July or August, and I think the AC in the gym might have even been broken, and all the male sign people in the gym had their shirts off, and they were all climbing, and and I thought, I'm going to take my shirt off too, and I did, and one thing led to another, and the police escorted me out, and the owner said I was only allowed back in if I would, behave myself, I think he said, which means, play by the rules of my gender that was assigned to me, and that's not my gender,
Carly believes that gender is actually a spectrum rather than two opposite options. California's new law reflects that, giving non-binary people the right to have official documents that classify them as they see themselves. Genia Dulo, VOA News, Berkeley, California.